listen, we're pro Second Amendment folks in my household. We are gun owners, responsible gun owners, like millions of Americans. There are a lot of women who are responsible gun owners and don't want that right to protect themselves or their families taken away, but no one's doing that.
Did you see that church, supposedly the black church that he went to with all of the...
Yeah, the black church that had hardly any black people in it.
It's like, wait a...
If you think that your vote doesn't matter, or that the vote for presidency doesn't matter because you're like, well, I'm upset with both, I'm not happy with either, or I've disagreed with Democrats in the past, I've been a lifelong Republican, I can't vote for a Joe Biden. Listen, I spent almost 30 years as a Republican. Me casting a ballot for Democrats in 2018, like as much as it's true, you know me, Don. When I was first hired at CNN, I was hired as a Republican political commentator. And so by 2018, the fact that I voted down ballot blue the first time in my entire life, it's not about left or right. It's about the person who's in that office gets to appoint Supreme Court justices who make the decisions on things that impact your rights and the rights of your daughters.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Don Lemon Show. I am Don Lemon, of course. That person you see up there on your screen is Tara Setmayer. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. Tara is here to talk all things political, all political developments, and we do have a lot to Tara. But first, tell us about this new initiative you have, because it's aimed at women.
Yes. I'm so excited to debut the Seneca Project this week. We have our first ad going up on MSNBC with Nicole Wallace today, and it's called A Time for Choosing. My fellow co-founder, Michelle Kinney, and I were looking at the political landscape and realizing that no one was really talking to just regular, everyday, average women. You know, not the far right or far left or the people who are activists, but just like regular, everyday women. And with everything going on in the political landscape today and this obvious, blatant attack on women's rights, just not just healthcare and reproductive care. It's broader than that. It feels like there's an effort on the part of MAGA and Republicans to really subjugate women and take us back. And obviously the name Seneca Project was inspired by the women's rights birthplace of the women's rights movement in Seneca Falls, New York, where it was a coalition effort of women and men who are allies and Black Americans at the time getting together saying enough is enough is enough. Women have had it. They didn't want to be second-class citizens anymore. And that was way back in 1848. It took 70 plus years to get women's right to vote.
But
here we are.
Ask you, because you say it's not just women's health care. I mean, it's a lot of things. It is also sensible gun legislation, right? I mean, just last week, there was the most recent move out the Supreme Court to strike down this ban on bump stocks, which is a gun modifier. You know what it is, that allowing semi-automatic rifles to fire at machine gun speeds. This ban was first introduced when you and I worked together. This was back in 2017, following that mass shooting in Las Vegas.
Yep, I remember.
Conservative justices have overturned this Trump-era legislation. What does this move by the conservative majority SCOTUS symbolize to you, Tara Setmayer, and to women in this project that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about looking at the ideas of freedom and what you want your family life and your community and what you want your country to look like. And women care about lots of things. And that idea of talking to especially right of center Haley voter women, looking at them, giving them a permission structure to vote for Joe Biden and realize that, you know, are these things that you're comfortable with? The gun issue is one that women care about. They're scared to send their kids to school. You know, I mean, listen, I'm a pro Second Amendment person. We're bipartisan, by the way. We have both Republicans, Democrats, Independents on our advisory committee, and we welcome everyone. So that's what makes Seneca unique from these other super PACs. But listen, we're pro Second Amendment folks in my household. We are gun owners, responsible gun owners, like millions of Americans. There are a lot of women who are responsible gun owners and don't want that right to protect themselves or their families taken away. But no one's doing that. The bump stock issue was something that enhances these weapons and makes them weapons of war. No one thinks that at this point that any average citizen should have access to this. So this was something that was a Trump era response to that mass shooting. And unfortunately, Donald Trump recently said that we need to get over the mass shooting issue, which I think is an affront to many Americans, particularly the women who are concerned about their kids going to school and dying in mass shootings. Get over it. No, that's just is an awful thing to say. But again, we need to continue to communicate what's at stake here and what then the difference is between what a President Trump potential return to power would look like versus reelecting Joe Biden. I think it's pretty clear on this issue where the Biden administration stands and where they stand where it comes to protecting families.
I'm just wondering, since you mentioned the Trump administration,
Yeah.
Tara, what do you think? How do you think this is going to affect his allyship or whatever with the NRA? Because he has accepted this reversal of the ban, but it was his. A spokesperson says that he encourages Americans to respect the decision. So, I mean, I guess, and he said get over the shootings, but does this affect his NRA relationship at all?
I don't think so. I mean, let's be honest. The NRA hasn't been an honest broker for a very long time.
Right.
This is not your grandfather's NRA, where it was teaching, gun safety and like hunting and just, protecting access to basic gun rights and being responsible gun owners. That NRA is long dead and gone. It's a matter of fact, I believe they filed for bankruptcy. They were caught up with a whole Russian influencer scandal, if anybody remembers that, Maria Butina and all of that nonsense with the NRA.
Right.
So the NRA has really fallen far. And those people who are still, that think the NRA is still influential, they're 100% in the tank for Donald Trump. At that point, it wouldn't matter what he said. They're still going to support him because they think he's, all about their guns and God. And so, more power to him.
I just wonder. I mean, since 2020, Tara. I mean, we've had trouble for decades now getting a handle on mass shootings, but the amount of mass shootings since 2020 yearly have remained well above 600 per year. Is that nuts? I mean, is banning bump stocks actually increasing our safety, or is it just a SCOTUS? Is that just political posturing by SCOTUS?
Well, I mean, the bump stock issue, by the way, was bipartisan. A lot of people agree that, like, what are we doing here? We don't need this. This is not something that you need access to protect yourself or your family, unless it's from, I don't know, a small army invading. There's no reason for the average person to have a bump stock, except to cause mass casualty. And, this has always been a really difficult and sensitive issue because people jump right away to, they're coming for all our guns. And no one is coming for your guns. No. Mass shootings are defined as, I think it's 4 or more people shot in an incident at once. And a lot of times the mass shootings, as defined by the law, it's in, it's local crime. It's what happens in, it's not these big, massive shootings that we see on the news all the time. Unfortunately, it happens in Black communities, in inner city communities, way too often. And the gun issue there and the way that you approach that is very different from the other types of mass shootings that we see publicly, like the school shootings and things like that, where a lot of times there were signs ahead of time, there's mental health issues, there were potential, like I'm a big fan of red flag laws, where you're able to report someone if you see that they're unstable or they've made threats, that there's a way to go to a judge and have due process to have those guns temporarily taken away so that there can be an assessment here. And then they have a way to get them back if they're deemed sane and whatever to have them back. There's a lot of things, there's steps in between gun confiscation, that's it, they're coming for our guns, and just a free-for-all. But we have to be measured in the way we approach it and look at the unique circumstances that some of these things happen and approach it more holistically than that. I think there's a common sense approach here that the country is becoming more amenable to than they were before, to your point, Don, because we're seeing these mass shootings, particularly the school shootings. When you start seeing kids being killed in school, it shakes you to the core. Not saying those other shootings don't matter. They do, but it just hits differently when it's kids.
It does, but nothing has been done. I mean, look, I'm old enough to remember Columbine, right? And
me too.
And I was a full-grown person, man, reporting, in a career reporting. And I remember Columbine. It shook us to the core. And
I
then
was in college. It was 95, right?
Yeah, and then we got over that. And then we started, and then there were other things. We got over that, and then we kept getting over it, and it's just, it's awful. Even look, the pandemic didn't help, right? Because even after this bump stock ban, mass shootings skyrocketed, exploded in the numbers after the pandemic. So do you think it's really the solution here? And especially if you look at, 3%, when we always talk about assault weapons, 3% were assault weapon murders, right? From everything that we've been talking about since 2020. 59% of the 13,620 U.S. gun murders, this was in 2020 was the last data that we had, non-negligent manslaughters, for which this data is available, it was really handguns. And if you take these handguns and you put these bump stocks on them, then you turn them into, assault weapons.
That's right. And I wanted to correct myself. Columbine was 99. Oklahoma City bombing was in 95. And it was on the same day. There was a correlation there. I believe it was like April of that year. There was a correlation. But anyway, that's the issue, right? There are more guns than people in this country. We're never taking all the guns away. It's just not going to happen. I understand that for folks that want to get rid of all the guns, that's not a practical solution. But turning handguns, and again, overwhelming majority of gun owners are responsible people and will never use their guns to murder other people in mass shootings.
Those aren't the ones we're worried about.
Right. Those aren't the people we're worried about. We're worrying about the folks that have the proclivity for violence and are now choosing to use these weapons to have not just to, kill people, but to kill people in large numbers. That, I think, is something we've seen that's different since Columbine. I remember back in the 90s, back when in the heyday of my Republicanism, there used to be the arguments over when the assault weapons ban was being pushed through and was signed, that the argument on our side was, oh, this is stupid. This is not going to affect anything. It's, less than 1% of crime is committed with these types of guns, with AR-15s and things like that. And that was true at the time, right? If you're telling me now that the statistic is 3%, that's an increase that I don't think anyone should be proud of. They should be concerned that now we're seeing more often that these weapons are being used or modified to carry out mass shootings.
Well, that was like rifles. Those were, guns that were made as assault weapons, right?
Right.
But they don't include the handguns and the other guns that are modified into becoming assault weapons.
That was the people would make the argument that, well, you can ban these things, but if you're hell bent on killing people, you'll find other ways to do it. They'll use knives. They'll use, pipe bombs, or you know what I'm saying?
I haven't seen a massive knife.
I agree with you. We have seen a couple of them overseas, not so much in the U.S., but even still, it's still not the same as when you have a high capacity weapon. High capacity magazines. There are a lot of things here that we can take a look at to possibly change things. A lot of it also, though, starts before they have access to the weapon. Yeah. A lot of these people have exhibited signs of either mental illness or have made threats, or there were run-ins where people didn't say anything when they noticed, loved ones saying like, oh, this doesn't surprise me. We've got to start there too. We've got a mental health crisis in this country as well.
But as you said, it's not just the people who do the mass shooting. I mean, look, it's everyday gun violence, right? When it's just, when it's not considered a mass shooting. And look, I'm just as afraid of that. As you said, there are more guns than people. And that's a frightening prospect that we should get a hold of. You can't just say, well, it's our God-given right. It's not your God-given right to take a life or to injure someone. And I don't think the Second Amendment is absolute. I don't believe that. I believe that there are restrictions on every single thing,
that's the ongoing debate, right, Don? It's like, how do we have a common sense, holistic approach to this? And
people don't want to. They become irrational.
Correct. And unfortunately, that's because the people in power on certain sides of this have decided that they don't want to try to come into the middle. But there are a lot of people in this country, throughout the country, who even Republican congressmen who were, all about guns, that's it, no restrictions. But you look what happened in Florida after Parkland, right? You had Republicans come together and say, you know what, we need to make some changes here. And they were the first ones to start supporting red flag laws, which is a step. It's a step. Let's not make the perfect be the enemy of the good. We've got to take steps toward these things. You may not get everything you want right away, but that was a huge step, and it's prevented a lot of domestic violence cases and things like that with people with guns that could have ended up dead. When you
said Parkland, you think of Parkland, you think of Columbine.
Yep.
You think of Aurora. Newtown. Like, we used to be able to name them.
I know.
But now there's the Pulse, right?
Right. Now Tennessee, what happened in Nashville.
Now you can't really name them because of, and these are just the mass shootings that we're talking about now that we're mentioning.
Buffalo.
But I got to ask you a question, a more political question. So, Hunter Biden was just found guilty 3 counts, right?
Yeah, I did,
He's buying a gun. and he lied about his drug use. Where are all the Second Amendment people who are, as I said, the Second Amendment is absolute? Why aren't they like out there supporting Hunter Biden?
Because of what
You know
I
that's
just
sarcasm,
said to
right?
you. I know. And it's because of what I just said. It's because the NRA and the gun rights folks, it's all about a certain political agenda. It's not about intellectual honesty or consistency. There's an agenda. So Hunter Biden is persona non grata. He's the boogeyman. He's the guy that they want to go after and exploit his personal troubles over the years to try to hurt the president. And I don't think it's worked, to be honest. It looks pathetic. It looks desperate. And I've said this for years and years, that Joe Biden is a good and decent man and a loving father. And so is the First Lady. She's a loving parent and mother. And she's watched her son go through his struggles. And there are millions and millions of families who have drug addicted family members or friends who they've watched suffer through this, and to exploit that and demagogue it in this way, I think makes Republicans look cruel and desperate. Joe Biden has consistently said, "I love my son, and I'm proud of him, no matter what." And I know that there are millions of people out there who struggle with addiction that wish they had a father and mother as loving and understanding as Hunter Biden has. Not excusing some of his other behavior. Just because we can explain it doesn't mean we should excuse it.
I'm glad you said that.
But because I think that's important.
Well,
but for political purposes, this has backfired on Republicans, because I think the American people are going, come on. Like, this is enough now. The guy's never held public office. He didn't work in the White House. He didn't have any, he wasn't taking public money, taxpayer money, as an employee of the federal government. Like, cut the shit already with this. Enough. This is desperate and stupid. And what does this have to do with Joe Biden?
We can get into that, but I'm glad you said the thing that he's a troubled human being. And look, he brought this on himself with the whole issue that he did. But
absolutely.
People who, if we were prosecuting people for lying on a gun application, then
which is rare, by the way. This is not a normal prosecution. Yeah. So
right, which is rare. We would be prosecuting a whole lot of Americans.
Well,
right?
we should explain to people how we got here, right?
Yeah.
So this was part of that special counsel. Now, if you want to talk about witch hunts, Donald Trump's favorite term, it's a witch hunt. The Hunter Biden thing with this kind of was a witch hunt. There was political pressure here. There was a special counsel appointed to look into stuff with Hunter, and they really couldn't find anything to prosecute him on. And they found this. And so, which is like a technicality. It's like almost never prosecuted. And it's really a process crime. And so Hunter Biden and his team had already agreed to plead guilty. They took a plea deal. They took a plea deal on this. But then there was political pressure because Republicans raised holy hell saying, oh my God, wait a minute. No. We're supposed to be nailing him. He's got to be something better. You can't just take a plea deal. So the judge and the special counsel, in my opinion, succumbed to that political pressure, and they withdrew the plea offer that he had already pleaded guilty to. Let's remember, he was taking responsibility, and they withdrew it and went to trial. So it wasn't a shock to me that he was going to end up found guilty. He had already admitted to it, so it made sense. It was consistent. What really matters at this point is what the punishment will be. But this came from political pressure, to your point, Don.
But you sound like
it's almost never prosecuted.
People will say you sound like the Trump people who say, "Oh, this crime that Donald Trump did in New York is never prosecuted, and it was a political witch hunt." And
no, a little different, because in this time, what Donald Trump did, the results of that were it influenced the presidential campaign. And what happened in New York is not necessarily, it was the tying it to another felony, but the falsification of business records
happens.
People get prosecuted with
prosecuted for that all the time.
All the time.
Okay,
So,
I'm glad you said that.
Now, listen, I'm here for it today, Don.
I know. I'm glad you got. Look, that's why we have you on. You're right. It's a different thing. And look, I say this. I said, look, Hunter Biden did something wrong, and so whatever, he has to face the consequences.
Yes.
I'm not going to sit here and say, Hunter is, innocent or whatever.
Right. No, me either.
You can hold two things at once. You can understand that they're exploiting the situation, the law. They're also exploiting his addiction issues, which I think is very shameful. And they're trying to find something, right, to pin on the president so that they can make him look bad. Yeah. Right? But I think it's actually backfiring. I believe
agree
you
with
said
you.
the same thing.
100%.
But Hunter, as a first time offender, I'm not sure he's going to get the 25 years in prison, which he could face. What do you think is going to happen?
No, he's definitely not going to get that. I think he's probably going to have to pay a fine. If he gets jail time, I'll be shocked. For something like this, for a first-time offender, to your point, he's been nothing but cooperative for the most part with this. And I think he's going to get some type of probation and a fine.
Yeah.
So, and you know what? To President Biden's credit, he has the ability to commute or pardon him.
He says he's not doing it.
And he said, I'm not going to do it.
What do you think of that?
I think that that's the honorable, right thing to do. You know, even as a parent, if you're not president of the United States, let's take the presidency out of it, and you're just a parent watching your son go through this, and you realize, well, you did it, you're going to have to pay the consequences, and it breaks your heart. But if you believe in the rule of law and you believe in discipline is necessary for order, you have to accept the result. And that's what President Biden and Dr. B have done. I mean, Joe Biden took time out of his schedule to fly to Delaware to hug his son after that.
Good for him.
Good for him.
But I don't know, Tara. Look, if that was a family member of mine, Joe Biden and Joe Biden, they're better people than I am, because I'd be like, look, Trump would pardon his children in a half a second.
He's already pardoned a bunch of criminals.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So I don't know.
He would.
I don't know.
But Don, to your point, that's the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Yeah. Donald Trump is a corrupt individual who engages in nepotism and cronyism and doesn't give two shits about the rule of law or being consistent or respectful of the way the process works in this country. Donald Trump hates everything that makes America great. Mm-hmm. So all of his hats that say make America great again, what a bunch of BS. He hates everything that makes America great. One of those things is our judicial system. Flawed as it may be, it's still a great system. And he hates it. But Joe Biden, even with it impacting his family directly, is still saying, listen, I accept the result. That's our system. And I love my son. And the end. That's the contrast, folks. That's the contrast. Character and decency matter. Respect for the rule of law should matter in this country.
What do you make of this? Do you know about this sort of jockeying? People are talking about, not jockeying, but people are talking about the two judges in the case, Judge Marchand and Judge Noriega, right, in Delaware. So Judge Marchand is in New York, and they're both their politics, right, their political positions are coming into play here, and what the rulings are. There's a sort of volleying back and forth between Trump and Biden in court. Do you think that there is a problem here with that? Because the judge in Delaware was appointed by Trump.
Right.
The judge in New York is a Democrat, right?
Right.
So what do you think of that? Should that even matter? Or is that just political bullshit?
It's political bullshit. It shouldn't matter. I mean, they both adjudicated the cases fairly. If anything, Judge Marchand in New York went above and beyond and then some to be fair to Donald Trump. I mean, unlike the judge in Delaware, Judge Marchand had to deal with an intransigent child who violated virtually every gag order that was put in place to protect the witnesses.
I'm so glad you said that.
Okay.
Tara,
and did not send his ass to jail.
You did not. I had not thought about this. The behavior
of the defendants.
Of the defendants. Yes, I'm going to let you talk about that.
Yeah.
But the behavior of a Hunter Biden who has issues with drugs and is a troubled person, admittedly, is not the president of the United States. He had more decorum than a former president. Go.
Yes. And just to be clear, Hunter Biden is clean now, and he has gotten himself together the last couple of years, and that's great for him. He's not currently using anymore. But yeah, that's correct, Don. Hunter Biden behaved himself as a criminal defendant. He wasn't out there holding press conferences every day. He wasn't attacking the judge as being some kind of sicko and saying that he needed to recuse himself, or none of those things, okay? None of them. His team wasn't out there saying, oh, this judge should be removed. We need to change a venue because it's a political witch hunt against me. No, he didn't do any of that. He went through the system just like any other criminal defendant and behaved himself and let the process work. Unlike Donald Trump, who said the most insane, insulting things about this judge, calling him all kinds of names, threatening the judge was threatened. Jurors were potentially threatened because of what Donald Trump said. And over 10 times he violated the gag order and then said crazy things almost every day after court. What consequences did he pay for it? Zero. And this is the judge that has to decide on sentencing.
Yeah, you're right about that. Talking about a two-tier justice system.
Yes,
right?
give me a break.
If you were writing a headline, what would it be? Hunter, gentleman, Trump, a-hole? I mean, I don't know. What was you?
I mean, I know. I thank God I'm not a headline writer, but
Jackass.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, petulant child. You know,
Entitled. Trump
entitled.
Hunter, gentleman.
Yeah, I mean,
respectful.
The contrast is glaring here, and you know, if you want to talk about political judges, let's talk about the Trump-appointed judge Eileen Cannon down there in Florida, who is completely outside of her depth, who is completely unqualified to be a federal judge, and who has screwed the documents case up so badly that the special counsel is thinking about trying to get her removed. And that's, now you want to talk about a political judge right there. She's done everything she can and bend over backwards to protect Donald Trump. And she didn't deserve to be appointed in the freaking first place. But this is a reminder to people that whoever is president of the United States has the power and responsibility to appoint federal judges for lifetime terms. Lifetime.
What's wrong with these people?
That's right. And Donald Trump appointed over 350 of them.
What's wrong with these people? I'm serious.
You have to be more specific with which people,
I'm talking about the crazy MAGA people. I'm talking about and why.
How much time do we have?
And why the hypocrisy never ceases when you look at what's happening. Listen, I spoke yesterday. Before I'm going to get back to.
Yeah. I have a quick answer to that. Go ahead. The answer to that is that there are people who have felt aggrieved and wronged in this country for whatever reason.
For what?
Don, people go through all kinds of experiences in this country. Who knows? It could be whatever reasons. They are aggrieved. Donald Trump has given voice and credibility and a platform to their grievances. So they can take it out on everybody else and see, I'm not alone here. I have someone who's championing our grievances too. And that's Donald Trump. Why they believe that he gives two shits about them is volumes will be written about the political psychology around this. Part of it is The Apprentice, which I know there's new books and there's a movie out about this, how 14 years of Donald Trump being beamed into people's households, making them believe that they were connected to him, translated into his political success. And so people feel they're connected to him. So their grievance is wrapped up in him. And look, he might be an asshole. He might be a liar. He might be all these terrible things, but he's mine. He's just like me. And I don't care about those other things. He's speaking for me. That's a very powerful connection. And that's what we're dealing with. It's crazy to me. And that's how you get into authoritarian movements and cults and things like that. But here we are.
That makes no sense for me, especially when it comes to evangelicals and Christians. I mean, I'm like, ooh,
that is a conversation for another day, Mr.
It's
Lemon.
all rhetoric on the Sunday. Speaking of, I talked about this yesterday on the show and on social media. Did you see that church, supposedly the black church that he went to with all of the...
Yeah, the black church that had hardly any black people in it.
It's like, wait, Tara... Have you ever seen anybody wearing a baseball cap inside of a black church or T-shirt?
No.
I'm saying, I was like, how disrespectful, really?
Right. I mean, there are some black churches where the women don't wear pants. Like there are in the South, like Southern Baptists. Like,
tell me about it. You had your hat every Sunday. You had your doily if you were in the, on the usher board or whatever. If you were deaconess.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Gloves and the whole nine.
But a Make America Great Again baseball cap in a black church. Get that what out of here. Come on now.
There was a story in the Washington Post where you had to dig deep down in a couple graphs to find out that the overwhelming majority of the people in attendance were not black, number one.
And we're bussed in.
And were brought in, and they were asking people online, like, are you a member of this black church? And they couldn't find anyone on the line who was an actual member of the black church in Michigan there. So this once again speaks to the smoke and mirrors of the Trump campaign. They tried this back in 2016 and 2020, where they would parade out a couple of black faces or find a black church. God knows how much they paid them to use the venue. And try to say, see, look at my black people.
Yeah.
People can see right through this.
I remember when maybe you were on the set with me. There was a night. It was the night before Kellyanne Conway took over or
Oh,
announced that
Lord.
she was becoming the campaign manager
Yeah.
or whatever for
My
Donald
former
Trump.
friend.
Or at least, I don't know, was she going to be the campaign manager? Or she was just working for him. I don't know. But this was after she was the,
Was on board
yeah, but
after
she was
she
a
left the
Ted
Ted
PAC.
Cruz. Right. She was,
Yeah, Ted Cruz
yeah.
super PAC.
Yeah.
Wasn't she like the person who held the super PAC or the founder of the super PAC?
No,
I
she
don't
like
know.
ran it. She was like
She
one,
ran the
yeah,
super PAC.
yeah.
Okay, so this was a night, and then we got into this, what do you call it? A discussion or debate on the set about a speech that the candidate Trump was giving. I think it was in Minneapolis or something. It may have been at a church, but it was a speech on race. And she goes, "Why does everything have to be about race?" And I said, because they build it as a Trump
Right. Speech on
race
race.
speech. So what are you talking about? And then she got caught and she said, "Why are you badgering me?" And I said, "Badgering you? Kellyanne, you've been on this show for years and this is the way we talk. Like, why are you so sensitive now? Delicate flower."
Right. So she was forecasting what it would be moving forward when you don't know, when you're caught in your own BS. Oh, you're attacking me.
Yes, attacking me.
Please, Kellyanne Conway is a killer, and like, don't let her, cutesy way fool.
She's
She knew
smart as
exactly.
hell.
She is. I've known her
Yeah,
for a long
cunning.
time. I mean, I don't recognize her now. She turned into this Trump fembot that I don't know what happened to her, but I'd known her for years, and she's a Jersey girl, South Jersey, but a Jersey girl, very sharp and known for her quick-wittedness. And so for her to do that to you is such a cop-out. And most people who know her are like, "Oh, come on, Kelly."
I'm just saying this issue of race really gets to them because they always like to try to turn it into race baiting when
Right.
you're actually pointing out something. They're the ones who are using it and billing it as something that is centered around race. And then when you point that out to them, all of a sudden that
Right.
is
Right.
racist, or as they call reverse racism, which doesn't exist.
No.
Can we talk about Mifepristone now?
Sure.
Because you saw the Supreme Court, maintaining access to that abortion drug. And do you think it's a step forward in reaffirming reproductive freedoms for women, or do you just think that they could not get past a law that said that they had no standing? Or do you think they realized that it would really, them up in November and they said, "We're not touching this"?
So I think it's a combination of a few things. I think it was a temporary victory for women's reproductive health and women's health care, in that mifepristone was still available and there weren't, questions about its availability and who can have it when and how. Small victory, and potentially temporary, because if you read Brett Kavanaugh's comments on this, he basically made the point that we voted on this because of standing, which is
It
a
says, quote,
technicality.
"Federal courts are
Yeah.
the wrong forum for addressing the plaintiff's concerns about the FDA's actions."
Right. So in other words, nod and a wink to the people out there who are against women's reproductive health care. Bring us a different case with better plaintiffs, because this one wasn't the right case for what you're trying to achieve. So it's just a matter of time before they regroup and file another case in the Fifth Circuit, because that's the friendliest, most conservative court for this kind of thing. And then it gets back to the Supreme Court. So that's why I say it's, it was a big win for the moment, but a small victory in this longer war here, because they're not going to stop there. And if you don't believe me, just look at what happened in Louisiana. That
Yeah.
they've now classified this as a narcotic, and it's under the same class as narcotics, not as a narcotic, but it's the same controlled substance. Which is, that's how they're gonna weasel their way into finding other creative ways to try to deny regular access. And 60% of abortions in this country are medical abortions, through pill form, with medicine, not necessarily procedure. So this was a big deal. They are coming for
Well, this is what happened with Dobbs. They kept going to the court and then getting denied, going to the court, and they're saying then, as they were saying then, bring us a better case. And finally, they got the better case.
And they got 3 Supreme Court justices who are more sympathetic to it, which goes back to my earlier point that the presidency matters for this, for women. And that's part of our message with the Seneca Project is speaking to everyday average women, particularly moderate women, right of center, left of center. Listen, if you guys are politically disengaged, this is what happens. If you think that your vote doesn't matter, or that the vote for presidency doesn't matter because you're like, well, I'm upset with both, I'm not happy with either, or I've disagreed with Democrats in the past, I've been a lifelong Republican, I can't vote for Joe Biden. It's not about the personalities. It's not about left or right. It's about the person who's in that office gets to appoint Supreme Court justices who make the decisions on things that impact your rights and the rights of your daughters. That's what you need to consider. Take the personalities out of it. Take whatever other like political negative partisanship you've had for years. Listen, I spent almost 30 years as a Republican. Me casting a ballot for Democrats in 2018, like as much as it's true, you know me, Don. When I was first hired at CNN, I was hired as a Republican political commentator. And so by 2018, the fact that I voted down ballot blue for the first time in my entire life, it was like, it was
Out of
weird,
body.
but you know what? It was the right thing to do. And as soon as I did it, I was like, this is the right thing to do. There's only one side that's actually doing things in the bigger scheme that are going to be pro-democracy. And that's all that matters for me, pro-freedom. And it's the Democrats, Republicans, I don't know what they're doing. But that's the same thing with this issue here. Whoever's president next could appoint 2 more Supreme Court justices.
All right, listen, you got 2 things that I want to talk about. Yeah. I'm going to talk more about the justices. Can you just hold that thought?
Yeah.
Should I go here or should I just continue? All right, let's just go here because you were talking about disengaged voters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll get back to some other things that have to do with the Supreme Court. This is a New York Times poll discovered that Trump has a sweeping lead over disengaged voters, a margin of plus 14 that could seriously sway the election in favor of his party. Yeah. And if he's able to capture their attention. So is the Biden administration making a big mistake here by not capitalizing on disengaged voters?
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows in politics that elections, campaigns are about addition, not subtraction.
Not subtraction, yeah.
So if there's a large pool of people who are first-time voters or disengaged voters that need to be activated. And I think that spans the spectrum, mostly of younger voters and minority voters who feel as though, why bother? Our vote doesn't count. But if you've seen lately the trends over the last couple of years that these with Trump, I mean, one of the upsides, people often ask, well, was there any positives to Trump? Well, one of them is that more people became engaged than they were before because they realized what happens with apathy. History has shown us the result of apathy in a democracy. And so that activated people. It activated a lot of women. I've had women come up to me and say, you know, thank you so much for speaking out. You made me sane. I felt as though I couldn't do anything. It didn't matter. But listening to you and others like you, like me, who have spoken out about the importance of stopping MAGA and Trump with our power at the ballot box has inspired people to get involved. And whether that's voting, whether that's volunteering to be poll watchers, whether that's organizing community event, voter registration events, people have gotten activated because they realize what happens when they're not. So the fact that those people who are disengaged still, which is like, hard to imagine given what's at stake here, but people are used to taking democracy and our freedoms in this country for granted.
Well,
that's the problem. So the Biden administration needs to absolutely go after those folks as well. They can shore up their coalition because there's a lot more people, I think, that are, once they realize what's at stake, are more on the Biden side than they are on the Trump side of things. I don't think there are more people overwhelmingly that want Trump's version of America. I really don't.
And it's also people, it's more on the Biden side. When people are talking, when they talk about Biden, it's not just Biden and it's not just Trump, right? It's sort of the idea and the attitude around the people who are there in the administration.
That's right.
Right. And because, look, we know Trump is not a bright person, but he knows PR. He knows how to co-opt people. Correct?
Yeah, like any other cult leader.
He's like one of those street guys. No, it's like a street guy. Hey, say man, listen, you want to know how to make some money? Let me tell you this. Hey, come here. Guess which shell the bead is under? You know what I mean? And they're like on the street doing that. Yeah. That's what he's going. Hey, snake oil salesman, that kind of. So he's smart in that way, but he's not a brainy guy.
No.
But so I'm wondering though, when you talk about these things, holding people accountable, is anyone going to hold Clarence Thomas accountable? Getting back to the Supreme Court, when you look at what happened with Harlan Crow and he didn't disclose all of these free things and these gifts and that he's like, riding on someone's, private jet and the yacht and trips and all of that. Is anyone ever going to hold him accountable? Because it doesn't seem like the Supreme Court has any accountability. And then we'll get to Alito and his wife.
This is another thing where elections matter, right? It all goes back to that. We, the people, have
In order
the power.
to form a more perfect
That's right.
established justice through
That's
domestic
right.
tranquility.
We have the power, very good, Don,
Provide
to
for the
make
common
the
defense.
change, to make that change.
Promote the general welfare. That's
General
the important
welfare,
part.
that's right,
Yeah.
that's right.
And listen, you COVID denier people and vaccines,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Promote the general welfare.
Right. You know, the Supreme Court has, for the most part, carried itself above reproach. These are the people that go to the State of the Union every year and sit there stone-faced. They don't even crack a smile because they want to seem above political reproach. In the past, it has been unthinkable for anyone on the Supreme Court, no matter where they came from on the ideological spectrum, to even remotely infer that they have a political position publicly. Now, under this Roberts Court and with these new folks, I mean, Alito and Thomas, and they've been sitting there quietly for quite some time now, and literally, like Clarence Thomas for the last 30 years, I think uttered 3 paragraphs during questioning, usually during arguments in front of them. He was known for like never asking questions. They've been harboring all of this pent up for years. And there's been no reason for the Supreme Court to have to police itself or for questions about the ethics of the Supreme Court, not in recent memory. It's been a very long time. They do not have the same ethics standards and enforcement as everyone else in the federal government. That's why Clarence Thomas has not suffered any consequences whatsoever for all of this unethical information that's come out about him taking millions of dollars worth of free luxury travel from a major Republican billionaire donor, Harlan
What do you think
Crow.
would happen if that was Sonia Sotomayor?
Are you kidding me? That they would be protesting in front of the Supreme Court every day, in front of her house, in front of anywhere she gave a speech. Republicans would be relentless. It would be, there'd be like a countdown on how many days that the corrupt Supreme Court justice is on the court. Could you imagine if someone paid off Sotomayor's mother's home and bought her a motor home and all of these things that Clarence Thomas has taken from Harlan Crow? You gotta be freaking kidding me. So the hypocrisy here is outrageous. And this really falls on the Chief Justice. John Roberts has the ability to enforce any type of ethics thing, but he refuses to because he's like, whatever, it's not a big deal. It is actually, people. So the only option, which is the nuclear option, is impeachment. That's the only way to remove a Supreme Court justice.
Will that happen?
That's never happening. No,
No, never happening.
That's never happening.
Okay, so listen, recently there were these recordings of Justice Samuel Alito confessing his belief that the country needs to return to more Christian principles, partnered with a Stop the Steal upside down American flag displayed outside of his home. That has added this spectacle to the SCOTUS, the brazenness and the partisanship, but also it is not just Alito and that have been stirring the pot. Sides have as well, right? Jenny Thomas encouraging White House staff members, Mark Meadows in overturning the 2020 election, or Martha Ann Alito openly shaming neighbors with pride flags outside their homes. And what did she say about the flag? She wanted to hang a flag or something that said
right, because she didn't want to look at it for the next month. Right.
Or something.
Yeah,
Oh my
vergogna in Italian, which means shame. What was more troubling to me about that's bad enough. But so she's intolerant. Okay, well, it's not illegal to be intolerant in the United States, unfortunately. But as a private citizen, but she also said how, we'll get them. I'm not worried about it. We'll get them. Like the idea of retribution, that she's in a position because of who her husband is and the political influence they have, that don't worry about us, we'll be just fine. No, they'll get theirs. And it's kind of like, I have an issue with that. That's very active, and I don't like it. And I don't know what it is. What are they drinking over there at the Supreme Court? Like, when they have receptions, the wives are there. Are they drinking from the same crazy juice? Because Ginny Thomas is batshit crazy. And it wasn't just her trying to encourage them to overturn the election. She's like a full-blown QAnon, barges to Gitmo type crazy those text messages were uncovered by my good friend Denver Riggleman and his technical team on the January 6th committee, former congressman. He's a data analyst. He does cyber security stuff. He's, it's all about data analysis. And his team, his forensic team, uncovered those text messages. And, we just shrug at that. Ginny Thomas was actively involved saying crazy shit.
But Martha Alito is the same thing with those flags.
And that's correct. And here she is with the flag thing. We find out her attitude, and now we're hearing more and more about Alito and how he actually feels about things. This is the guy who wrote the opinion on Dobbs. So, this is a problem. They should be recusing themselves. Like Clarence Thomas shouldn't be anywhere near any cases that have to do with Trump and January 6th.
I wonder if a smart attorney could come up with a way to, I don't know, go back and sort of litigate the overturning of Roe v. Wade, considering all this stuff that's just come out.
I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer, and so in fairness, I don't know. That's a question for someone smarter than me, above my pay grade here on constitutional law.
Because how they go back and they say, at the time we did not know this, we did not have this knowledge or this evidence, and blah blah blah.
But see, I don't know how that applies to the Supreme Court. It's different when it's the lower courts. There's different applications here. But I know.
If there's a breach, impeach.
Right.
If it's overreach, impeach.
Right. Look, the first most immediate thing that can be done so that we avoid this in the future is to have Congress, have a functional Congress. So make sure in November when you're voting, not only for president, you pay attention to who your congressperson is and your senator. They need to pass an ethics package that applies to the Supreme Court, where there's actual enforcement and where the Chief Justice doesn't have unilateral control over it. Because right now they're untouchable. And even the senators like Dick Durbin and those are like, please come and testify. And the Supreme Court justices are like, no, we don't have to.
Did you just give me a double finger?
That's what they did. That's what the Supreme Court justices did, by telling Dick Durbin where to put his, firmly worded letter about please come and testify to these things we have questions about. They're like, no, we don't have to. Who's going to make us?
I love it. So in the monitor behind Tara, I see a Lincoln on the photograph of Lincoln up there. I also see a baseball cap that says the Seneca Project.
Yes.
Make sure you go to SenecaProject.us.
Yes.
Tara, you're always very knowledgeable. I just have one request.
Yeah.
I need a hat. Okay.
Oh my gosh,
and you owe me 2 caps now.
I know. We're going to get a London Royce one, and we'll get you a Seneca Project hat. We have them in white too, so you just let me know which color you like.
Summer, summer
white.
in the Hamptons, white.
You got it.
I need to go with my white pants.
You got it. Well, people can go to the website too if they like the hat. We'll have them there. They can get merch. some merch for the moment, as we call it, and follow us on all our socials at Seneca Project US.
Absolutely, I recommend it, especially because women need to get involved, and they should also be knowledgeable and informed. Thank you, Tara Setmayer. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Galvanize women, save democracy. That's the Seneca Project. Thanks, Don.
Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.